What's up, folks? Maximilian here, and welcome back to Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, The Online Warrior Season 2, when we just hit Episode 20. For you guys that missed last week's episode, we were talking about the tier list of characters, and how it might be possible for lower tier characters to make it to the higher tier, and today's topic of conversation is actually going to focus somewhat around that as well, and is somewhat a follow-up that has happened over the past week of people talking about tier lists and characters in certain brackets of tiers, and how good they might actually be, and how bad some of them might actually be, in the overall general competitive scale of Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. But before we get into that, let's cover a little bit of what happened at Winter Brawl. For you guys that might have missed it, Winter Brawl was a tournament that happened this past weekend, and was one of the biggest Ultimate Marvel 3 tournaments so far of the year. I think it had a pretty similar outcome to the tournament that came before it, which I believe was Canada Cup. But regardless, I think it was Chris G versus PR Balrog, and PR Balrog has been making it to the top 3 of a multitude of tournaments nowadays, and I believe he even won Super Street Fighter 4 with Fei Long at Winter Brawl. And it was a similar matchup to before. I believe PR Balrog was using his team of mostly Virgil and Doom and Wolverine. I might have one character off there, but Chris G was using his usual Virgil, Morrigan, and Doom team. And in this situation, Chris G actually won. We had a pretty big conversation last time this happened, where there's a chance that Rushdown could end up beating out the zoning strategy, but it just goes to show you how much of like a scale it can be, where it just leans in one direction and it goes back in the other, you know? It's not like one person has this ridiculously dominating strategy, how Wolverine just beats out Morrigan. It's not that case, and it's not the case with Ultimate Marvel 3. As random as this game can get, there isn't one deciding dominating factor player that'll just be dominating throughout everything. Even though Chris G is pretty close, there are people that'll come in and will change things all of a sudden, and you don't have like an outcome that was not predicted at all, and it's like, oh wow, this is totally random, just like Ultimate Marvel 3. It's kind of the case with the game, and that's why Ultimate Marvel 3 ends up being a really exciting type of competitive game to watch. If you guys want to check out any of the Winter Brawl, I think a lot of them are on YouTube already. But getting into today's topic of conversation, which is talking about these tier lists, and essentially a follow-up from last week, because there was some recent ongoings that happened within the community talking about tier lists and how the characters within the tier lists remain effective throughout a game's competitive life cycle. Now, to clear this up before we get into this, I did mention this before about how important a tier list is. For you guys that don't know, tier lists, when it comes to any fighting game, are taken on a representative scale of the maximum potential of those characters against other characters, like people that are the best with them versus people that are the best with the others, and you have like a comparative scale to understand, like it's a 6-4 matchup in this character's favor, or something like that. With Ultimate Marvel 3, it's a little bit different because it's a team-based game, and you almost have to tier list team composition instead of individual characters, but you can still take individual characters on a tier list example by how effective their assists are, how well they can be put into synergy of other teams, and how good they are on point or the back end using things like X Factor. There's a lot to consider in Ultimate Marvel 3, which makes the game really dynamic as far as building a team, and why it's still popular to this day. But what happened was some notable players and some of the our current reigning EVO champion made a tier list that was up and was made very popular very quick, about his discussion of the top-tier characters versus some well-rounded characters that have problems, and then the low-tier characters that don't have a chance. Now, let me give you guys an example of this. Some of the top-tier characters picked are, of course, Doom, Morrigan, Virgil, Zero, Magneto, Wolverine, Spencer, Sea Viper, Nova, and Strider, with right next to him being Phoenix, Frank West, Hawkeye, Trish, Amy, MODOK, Storm, Dante, so on and so forth. What was shocking that, when put into the low-tier perspective, we saw characters like Iron Fist, Deadpool, Captain America, Hulk, Iron Man, Thor, Phoenix Wright, Tron, Akuma, Rocket Raccoon, Beautiful Joe, Nemesis, Sentinel, Chun-Li, Shenko, Wesker, and She-Hulk. Now, what's kind of shocking about this is how different the tier list representatives are, and these are the people that are the best at the game taking this consideration. A lot of people were like, how the hell do you put Cap? How the hell do you put, Wesker? How the hell do you put, Hagar and Sentinel and all these characters in such a low tier list? Well, their reasoning behind it was the fact that these characters will not win tournaments. There's no way, with how Ultimate Marvel 3 is developing, that these characters have a chance against these other characters. And this is what I've been saying for a really long time. There's no reason to pick somebody like Deadpool if Magneto does almost everything Deadpool can do, including keep away, just better, and he's just more effective and is better for team synergy and things like that. This is kind of the case with a lot of fighting games, and this is the harsh, quote-unquote, reality of fighting games, that what Filipino Champ said and what he's going through here is actually correct. This is an accurate representation of how fighting game tier lists get rounded out over the life cycle of a game. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is an extreme example of this, showing you the fact that only a select 5 or so characters were actually really effective in upper tournaments between like Storm, Magneto, Cable, Captain Commando, Psylocke, and things like that. And there may be some others in between there, but it was for a majority 5 characters that you would see everywhere, and everybody used those characters. This is actually how fighting games work, and the reason you need to consider why this is the case, and a lot of people were getting upset, is like, why are these characters so low? They're still good, they're still easy to use, they still do good damage, but in the large scale of things, when it comes to hardcore competitive fighting games, guys that actually spend all their time and the majority of their free time getting good at fighting games, this is how things are going to go. Why is this, you might ask? Why don't people like go to other small tier characters and end up showing crazy new stuff? Well, unless they're low tier specialists, which there are some guys out there that are like this. There are some dudes that absolutely stick with characters they just like and play the team out to the end. And those are the most fun to watch because, of course, they're the underdog in situations like that. Everyone likes rooting for an underdog, including myself. But a lot of the dudes that want to pick these characters and a lot of guys that are hardcore into fighting games and really are competitive by nature, what do they want? They want to win. So no matter what type of strategy is developed, no matter what type of technology is figured out, how cheap something might be, as long as it's in the game system, you better believe that the majority of these really competitive players are going to begin to gravitate over to that direction, and we definitely saw that with a lot of Virgil's case in Ultimate Marvel 3. Remember how everyone was saying how Dante was amazing in Ultimate Marvel 3, and that he's like maybe even a better character, or not a better, but maybe an easier to use character than he was in his vanilla version? There's not that many people in higher level competitive play playing Dante anymore, and he's kind of a character specialist character because a lot of the people that are on the upper levels of like top 32 to top 16 to top 8 in high competitive play find that that character has a lot of faults with some of his combos and doesn't have the mobility necessary that some other characters that easily can do. It's pretty shocking to see how like some of the perspective we had early on of characters and why these characters are good is now completely gone for things like touch of death combos and moves that are encompassingly powerful by their length and their cancelability like Virgil and things like that. And characters like Wesker end up being still really good in their own regard. They're gonna beat a lot of people that don't know what they're doing, and they're very good for people that don't know what they're doing as well. So you're gonna see a lot of it in online environments and stuff like that. But when it comes to upper level top tier type of stuff that you see in top 8s, unless that person is an absolute specialist with the character, you're not going to see a lot of crazy different new things with a character like Wesker, you know what I mean? A lot of the stuff that has been discovered has already been discovered, and everyone knows it. You know, things are still being discovered with a lot of these other characters, like crazy guard break setups and things that you just don't have any option to guard. Like, you just have to guess multiple directions, like Zero and incoming, and Zero just keeps getting better and better even the later the game gets. This is the case with fighting games. People are going to gravitate towards characters that have naturally broken stuff. And the people that end up being character loyalists that stick with, you know, other characters are just the ones that are going to be more fun to watch. But in all honesty, they're going to lose. They're not going to be the ones winning tournaments all the damn time. And especially the case for a lot of other fighting games. Like, if you look back at Third Strike, the majority of the top tournaments were Chun-Li and Yoon and Ken right behind it. There weren't many others that really changed that break of that cycle throughout the long run of that game. And I was personally really upset with it because I hated going to EVO for like Third Strike so many years and seeing Chun versus Chun every single year. It was nothing that exciting because it was a boring match and whatever. But that's the case. A lot of people gravitated towards using these characters because they're powerful. Now, when I say this is the nature of competitive games, this isn't just the nature of competitive fighting games, it's the nature of a lot of competitive video games in general. You're going to gravitate towards the most powerful strategy if your goal is to win. If your absolute and mighty goal is to win money, and that's essentially how you're going to be paying for things, well, you better go to the highest, most top tier thing, because if you need it as a resource, then they're going to use every resource they have available. So I don't blame Filipino Champ for putting these characters on lower tier, because what he's actually saying is a harsh reality. Not a lot of people would like to accept it, and a lot of people would say, but these characters can do good every once in a while. It's true. A character like Captain America every once in a while can take out a ridiculously top-tier team. It's Ultimate Marvel 3. Crazier things have happened. But when it comes to the majority of the time and the greater mean of the results of matches, you're not going to see Cap, and you're not going to see Deadpool, and you're not going to see these guys reigning on the top tier lists and in top 8s for, you know, all time. It was actually pretty crazy the fact that we saw a MODOK in top 8 in Ultimate Marvel 3 at EVO last year. Like, that was a huge thing, and everyone was rooting for the guy. I believe his name was T.A. Fruitsy. So don't get your hopes down. Like, these things do happen every once in a while, and it's really exciting with it when it does, and that's kind of the nature of, like, upper echelon tournament play. You want to see these guys do good with these characters. And for the most part, and personally myself, I just stick with the characters that I like, the characters that I feel are really satisfying to perform combos with. The biggest reason I've gone back to using Dante nowadays is the fact that I like the feel of Dante combos when they connect. They feel really satisfying, even though Dante's a little bit of a pain in the ass to use online because you really need to be on tight with those frames of animation and hitting those hit confirms. But to summarize, what you guys shouldn't be, like, really upset about is seeing the same characters over and over again in top 8s of a game. I think the most exciting time that Marvel vs. Capcom had as a game was when the first, like, 3 or 4 months Marvel 3 came out, and there was just a huge splurge and variety of teams that you would see going on these weekly tournaments. It was exciting. It was really fun. And people were discovering things left and right because Marvel was a game that was about discovery and figuring things out. And then things kind of changed down the line, and it all went into the DHC glitch and how many characters could really use and abuse the DHC glitch. But for the most part, that period was the most fun because you saw the most stuff. It might seem like it's been a really long time since then, because it kind of has. Like, I would almost wish that there would be annual updates to a game like Ultimate Marvel 3 or Marvel vs. Capcom or Street Fighter Cross Tekken. These annual updates that would change and balance the things we have issues with and maybe add a few characters. I think that would be the best strategy Capcom would have to alleviate something like this, where you have these characters that sit atop this dominating tier list. So you got to consider the guys that played Marvel 2 for so long. Do you think they're upset the fact that Magneto and Storm and Captain Commando, etc., are ridiculously powerful in that game, or they just played it for so long that that's the way it is, and if you want to win, you just have to use it? It's one of those things that I accepted back in the day when I played Marvel 2, and I kind of accepted that I was going to play the unique characters I wanted to play back in the day, and I wasn't going to win very often against all these dudes. But if I can take somebody down using characters that weren't exactly the most proficient, then it would feel really damn good. It just turns out that in Marvel 3, the characters that I really enjoyed using from the get-go end up being pretty damn good, so who knows how that eventually happened. But regardless, like I was saying, don't be upset that you see the same characters in top 8s at tournaments. It's kind of a good thing that you're watching these guys use everything to the game's ability and their best. The cheapest, most harsh stuff where you don't even get to play the game, one-touch deaths, things that are impossible to block, stuff like that, because it's really interesting to see these things used on a higher level. But just as much as this stuff exists, there's other things that exist within content creators like myself and other guys on YouTube that are dedicated to using all these other characters. So it's not like, you know, you don't have to watch this. You're not forced to look at these characters every single waking moment. There are tons of guys on YouTube now that provide content for almost every single character in the game that you can find a name for. Check out their channel or check out match footage with them and go find some awesome games where they're playing with Shuma Garath or Jill or something like that. As much as I would like to provide that, getting good with a character in Ultimate Marvel 3 with no experience at all, as you guys might have been seeing from the week of Random, is really hard, because if anything, you're trying to learn the moves. I didn't have any bread and butter combos for these characters, and it's a very difficult thing, especially going up against upper echelon top tier characters. So I don't think Filipino Champ or any of these top 8 guys are going to be switching their characters anytime soon. It is the nature of competitive fighting games, and whether you like it or not is up to you, but it's kind of the way it goes. And it's one of those things where I was never a huge advocate of it. I like seeing low-tier characters as well, or characters that you don't see all the time as well, and I enjoy using them every once in a while. But the amount of dedication to those characters is great, because you don't immediately see what makes them so effective, like all these other guys that are on the screen all the time. So hopefully this makes a little bit more sense to you guys about how, or the brutal truth of competitive fighting games and competitive gaming in general, on how things will go if you guys want to get into these games. What it's up to is you. If you guys want to see more of this, you need to be the change you want to see, and you need to go out and get good with characters, or find people that are good with them, and support the guys and the folks that actually use the characters you don't see all the time. So as much as I would like to do that myself, I'll try. I know that the footage you guys seeing right now from this play session of Ultimate Marvel 3 is definitely me using my old classic team, because like I've said many times before, you get in the upper echelon of ranked in Ultimate Marvel 3, and everyone's using their crazy ham beast team of I want to win or nothing else matters. So it's challenging, which is why things like the random week of using player matches and getting everybody involved is a real fun way to use other characters and to get that other stuff on the channel. So if you guys are enjoying that, and you're still enjoying watching me using my old teams and the stuff I'm good with at the same time, please leave me some feedback below. And if you got something out of this topic of conversation for this week, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. If you have anything that you'd like to talk about or have me explain about the upper echelon or the deep metagames or things of how Ultimate Marvel 3 works as a game, also leave a comment below and I'll try to tackle it in a later episode. My name is Maximilian, and I'll see you guys next time.